Welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth Liz Muschett, and today it's the Astrology Star Sisters with the new moon forecast for Pisces 2025. And my star sister joining me today is Madam Simon. Hi, Simon. How you doing today?
Oh, decent enough. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to talk about the new moon in Pisces that happens in a couple of days.
Yeah, one moment. I just realized, oh, that's so much better. I was like, why is it very dark on one side? Yes, I would love to talk about the new moon in Pisces.
Okay, here we go. So, Madam Simon's website to get a hold of her is iconalchemy.com, and my website is alightpath.com. And we enjoy hearing from you. So, we're talking about the Pisces new moon, and this is a picture I took a few days ago, and it reminded me of Pisces, the fog and the mist. So, for manifesting with the Pisces new moon, I always write down what I wish to release, read it, and then I burn it, but you could rip it in a little shreds and dispose of it in the garbage or use it for compost or put it in the recycle bin. And then I write down my desires that I wish to manifest. And I work at between 3 and 5. I mean, it can be as many as 10, but be as specific as possible. Then I light a candle and um, take a moment of silence and just contemplate what I've written down and dream big. Do you have anything that you'd like to add, Simon, of what you do for New Moon?
So, I don't do multiple desires typically. It's more that I look at a theme that I wish to work with for the month. Um, so, and typically, how could I put this? Typically, it presents itself to me. Like, I often don't actually have to think very hard about it in terms of what I'm intending for the month because I already have a pretty good idea of, like, you know, what's going on that fits the theme. What are the general principles of a particular new moon, like a Pisces new moon? What does it light up in my chart? What area of life does it affect? Um, so, for example, Pisces for me is the sixth house. So that means a Pisces new moon, I'm going to be applying, the Piscean themes of um, emotional sensitivity and intuition to work and daily life, sixth house area of life. Um, and then how specific I'm going to get with that, obviously, that's, whatever my personal things are involving that. But just having that basic framework already makes it very easy to hone in on what I need to do.
Well, thank you for sharing. And another thing that I want to remind people is you don't have to do it exact moment of the new moon. I like to sometimes start working on it the day of the new moon or even the day before, and then wait to complete it until the first sliver. So that's a day to 2 days afterwards and light the candle because to me that's the spark that ignites whatever I ask for at that new moon. And I like that you do it a little different than me, so it gives people different choices and different ideas.
Right. And I agree with you regarding waiting until the actual light of that first crescent. Um, it- the dark of the new moon, I view as an incubation time for those intentions for the month ahead. So that's kind of, where I'm sort of meditating on or stewing on the themes that I just, of the sign and of the area of life that the new moon is in. Um, and then it's, yeah, definitely with that first crescent is when I'm actually going to get firm about what it is.
And this Pisces new moon takes place on February 27th at 4:45 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and that would be 7:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Pisces is a mutable sign. So it's about bringing things to completion and wrapping up and tying up loose ends to move on to what comes next. It's a water sign, so it's emotional and intuitive. It's ruled by Neptune as its modern ruler and Jupiter as its traditional ruler. And new moons are about new beginnings, a creative, and initiation. Would you like to add anything?
No, I think that pretty much covers it.
So the mantra for Pisces is I imagine. And can you share the keywords and the cautions with us, please?
Sure. Pisces is visionary. It's associated with dreams and intuition and sensitivity, empathy, art, music. It's adaptable, associated with fantasies. It is spiritual and compassionate. The caution is confusion, feeling as though you're in a fog. Escapism can be a strong tendency. And getting mired down in self-pity. There's a kind of a sacrificing element to Pisces that we can get caught up in that narrative, right? As with any sign, there's this a matter of how are we approaching the themes of the sign, and then what are we telling ourselves about it, right?
Exactly.
Anything that's going on in our life, the stories that we tell ourselves about the things that are going on in our lives are going to color our impression of them. Becomes a feedback loop. So
Thank you. So, out of bounds planets, an out of bounds planet is when it exceeds the declination of 23 degrees and 27 minutes north or south. It means the planet is out of the bounds of the sun and acting on their own and sometimes acting out of character. So, um, from February 6th, oh, I have the wrong dates on there because this should be, well, February 6th through the 10th and the 21st through the 25th. So it wasn't out of bounds. This moon is not out of bounds. So we have Mars from January 1st to April 7th. And Mars is out of bounds for a few months here. So that's continuing. And then the Pisces new moon in the chart for Seattle is occurring in the seventh house. And the seventh house is about relationships that we have with people. Do you want to say anything about the new moon in the seventh house?
well, I mean, that is specific to the West Coast, for it to be in the seventh house. Um, so my opinions on this are somewhat biased, as a result of my natal moon is in the seventh house. Okay. And I don't know if this happens to you as an astrologer, but to me, I will find that often people who become my clients have shared placements with me. Okay. And so, in particular, people who have as their sect light, the moon is my sect light, in the seventh house, that shows up frequently for me. and so, having the lights in the seventh house, the sun or the moon, the lights, you can have this sense that you are lit up, that you are most fully yourself, either on a conscious or unconscious level, whether it's the sun or the moon, right? When you are in the presence of other people. Okay. Now, note that doesn't automatically make you an extrovert.
Exactly. I can agree because my luminaries are on the angles in the fourth and seventh house. And I
Yep.
seem to attract people with, and I use the word luminaries. So it's another term for the sun and moon. And Simon used different terminology, which is great because we're using different terminology that means the same thing. So we're covering a lot. But I seem to attract people that have luminaries in the seventh and fourth house into my life.
Yep. And Liz and I both share seventh and fourth house luminaries. And so, yes, I find that when one has a luminary, when one has a light in the seventh house, um, one's relationship with other people is going to have a strong impact on one's core sense of self. And so, for those of us who are here on the West Coast for this new moon, then the new moon and its initiation of a new lunar cycle, okay, and the themes of this month then are likely to have an impact on our core sense of self through other people, whether that's through like a romantic relationship or a relationship with an employer, or other close one-on-one kinds of interactions. Those are the ones that are really going to stir something for us, that tells us something about who we are.
Thank you. So here we have the chart and we have the aspects to the new moon. Go ahead and jump right in, Simon.
Okay, so this new moon is, well, it appears to be part of it's loosely part of a grand water trine. I would actually view that Saturn as being more thoroughly involved in the grand water trine than the actual sun and moon. But the moon will be hitting Saturn. It's applying to the conjunction with Saturn soon after. I think we're looking at probably that night or into the next day. And that's with Mars in Cancer and Vesta in Scorpio. And this new moon is also square Jupiter in Gemini. And the thing is that Jupiter is the traditional ruler of Pisces. And so even though, Jupiter is Jupiter, so Jupiter's always going to try to bring us good opportunities, good luck, to bring us hope and faith, okay? But when the sun and moon are squaring Jupiter and Jupiter's ruling the sign that the sun and moon are in, then things are a little more wonky, especially since Jupiter in Gemini is considered to be in detriment. Jupiter's trying to do Jupiter things, but doesn't necessarily have the same resources that Jupiter's used to dealing with. Jupiter likes things to be philosophical, okay? And there's this kind of a sense of things being right with the world when we're looking at Jupiter. That's what Jupiter wants us to see, is what is right with the world. But Jupiter in Gemini is getting lots and lots of information. And because Jupiter makes anything that Jupiter touches bigger, now there can be this information overwhelm. And when you contrast that to Pisces, as we mentioned, Pisces is sensitive, is spiritual, is compassionate, is empathetic. Okay. But when you're getting bombarded with lots of information, some of which may be misinformation, then it's like your heartstrings are being tugged in multiple directions by information that seems to turn on a dime. First it's, this thing is happening over here. Oh, but wait, that's not actually what happened. Right? And that in turn can perhaps lead to a little bit of emotional burnout. Okay. Note that with this grand water trine, that is Mars, newly direct, but still Mars is going to be at that 17th degree of Cancer up until, I think, March 9th. And so Mars is still appearing to be stationary in the sky for a while, right? It's going to take a while for Mars to get up to speed, and Mars won't leave the retrograde shadow until May 1st. Okay. So anytime we've got Mars involved, there is that potential for, for frustration, aggravation, burnout, or impulsiveness. Saturn, as part of that grand water trine, is actually a steadying hand. Okay. But when you have two malefics trying each other, it can increase the flow of malefic stuff. Okay. And so with Saturn, that can bring a sense of hardship or depression, or, kind of this sense of seriousness, maybe heaviness. Okay. The importance of the things that we're feeling, since this is in water signs. So there can be some heavy emotions, I think, with this new moon.
I would agree. The emotions.
Yeah. Vesta in Scorpio puts our focus on our deep, dark, intense feelings. And then, of course, Mars is, wanting to move forward after so much time moving backward, but still, in this very slow state of being. And so we can feel like there are these powerful feelings that we are grappling with that may be slowing us down, or that we may have uncertainty about how to move forward in the face of, what is it I'm supposed to do when there are these things that I'm feeling weighing on my heart.
Well, and Mars doesn't really want to feel. Mars just wants to do.
Yeah. But Mars is in a moon-ruled sign. So here Mars is having to grip with feelings, wrestle with feelings, and has been for, the time of the retrograde. And now would very much like to move forward and maybe leave some of that behind. But here we are with this new moon, with Mars still in Cancer, and answering to that moon. Okay. So it's interesting, because when we were talking about, what is the things that are associated with Pisces. Pisces is eldest sign. It is the end of the zodiac. It wraps up the stuff of the previous signs. Okay. It sometimes is referred to as the garbage can of the zodiac, because it has to deal with all the stuff that the other signs neglected to deal with. And so there is this wrapping up feeling that we can have with Pisces. It is the end of a cycle. And right now, with the huge pileup in Pisces that we talked about in a previous show, there's a whole lot of that big ending, big wrapping up kind of energy going on. And it's Pisces, so it's emotional, so we are all in our feelings about it. But it's also, because it's Pisces, it can be confusing feelings.
Well, my advice would be to feel the feelings as gently as you can, and maybe with that Jupiter and Gemini to write about it, because that might help to release some of that tension.
Write about it, or talk about it with a trusted friend. But also perhaps to recognize that if you've got a lot of thoughts going on with a lot of feelings, and maybe you're going around in circles, to kind of maybe try to take a step back from things. Maybe do some things like go for a walk. Pisces rules the feet. So I very much feel like processing our thoughts and feelings during this time can benefit from going out, getting a walk out in nature, especially, uh, and just kind of grounding ourselves through our feet.
And it doesn't have to be a long walk. It can be a short walk if that's not easy to do, or maybe soak your feet in some salt water or something, because sometimes that's
Epsom
kind of.
salts.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, now we have some more aspects here to go through. We have a Thor's hammer, and that's with Vestas Square Series. And then they are sesquiquadrate, which is 135 degrees to Mars. And would you like to talk about that Thor's hammer, Simon?
Oh, it's not Vesta, actually. The square is to
Oh, it's Juno.
Juno. Yep, the square is to Juno. So yeah, Juno square series, both sesquiquadrate Mars. So anytime we have a Taurus hammer, the kind of tension of the square puts pressure on the apex planet, in this case being Mars. And so, how I just said, Mars is still slow, still looking like it's stationary in the sky, wanting to get moving forward and not have to deal with all these feelings, but not yet up to speed, and not truly going to be up to speed and out of the retrograde shadow until May 1st. And yet, here we have Juno and Ceres. Ceres can relate to our hunger, literal hunger, sure, but also, in this case, our emotional hunger, since she's in Pisces, our creative hunger, our desire for a better world. Okay. Our compassions are stirred up with Ceres in Pisces. Ceres in particular can relate to our sense of grief, the grieving for the things that are problematic in the world, or our sense of loss, where we had life was a certain way and there have been big changes, and now life is no longer that way. And regardless of whether those changes are good or bad, that's not the point. Okay. We still can grieve for things that were. Okay. So Ceres in Pisces then is doing that work of drawing our attention to those kinds of feelings. And at the same time, when she is squaring Juno in Sagittarius at that 0 degree of Sagittarius, which is ruled by Jupiter. Okay. Juno is about our bonds, our agreements, the things that we agree to in order to keep our relationships and our institutions functional. And when she is in Sagittarius, she is looking at what are the ideals behind those agreements. Are we being honest and forthright in our agreements? Sagittarius is represented by the archer, the straight shooter, okay, who can be honest to a fault, right? Doesn't always put things in the most tactful manner. But nonetheless is burning with that fire of idealism. Okay. There can be something very fervent in Sagittarius. When it's not doing so well, it can be fanatical. Okay. And so there's this tension here between the ideals surrounding our agreements and then these feelings that we have and the losses that are distressing to us. and our hunger for, a more kind, compassionate, creative solution to these things. Now, the hard aspects like the square are not inherently bad. They simply produce a certain amount of tension. And that tension can be great for getting us off our butts, right? And getting us to do things. So, if we want to have a better world, we want to have a better life, whether it's on a personal level or a societal level, this particular tension of this Juno Ceres square can be very useful. It stirs up these poignant feelings, but also forces us to define what are our ideals and how are we going to use them to make the world that we desire. And now both of those together are putting all that pressure on Mars to act at a point when Mars is like, hold on a minute, I really want to do stuff, but I can't quite get moving yet. So that suggests a kind of building tension. Okay. The Taurus hammer can actually dredge up fears and anxieties on a survival level. It can actually be disproportionate even to what are the driving forces. And so if you start to get like excessively anxious at this time, again, it helps to take a step back. Remember that these are the forces we're working with, and they're not meant to keep us scared all the time. They're just meant to make it so that we really have a strong motivation to act when it is time to act. And so this is building up that impetus to really get going once Mars is ready to get going. So in terms of other aspects that we see going on here, we have Mercury is sextile Uranus here. Uranus is, of course, the liberating principle, surprises we see with Uranus. We also see technological matters. So Mercury sextile Uranus is great for working with tech. Can make certain things go more quickly. Can speed some stuff up, can bring some surprises to our day. Since it's a sextile, it's a helpful transit, but it can still kind of sometimes have things moving very quickly around us when maybe, again, because Mars is still slow, when we might be like, oh, how do I catch up with this? Right? And can also have us having lots of thoughts, and perhaps lots of thoughts that can be that can bring us insights, inspiration, but might be fleeting. So if you have a good idea, write it down, and write it down when you have the idea. Don't wait because it might disappear. Also, we've got Mars square Chiron. Chiron is in Aries, which is ruled by Mars. So Chiron is feeling the effects of Mars still being slow and being at the apex of that Taurus hammer, right? And Chiron in Aries has been teaching us about how we're perhaps not as independent as we would like to think, how we can't actually get everything done by ourselves, and especially for Americans, that is challenging to our national myth. And it should be noted, of course, America's having a Chiron return right now. And we're being reminded that in order to have, you can't just have a nation that's a whole bunch of individuals who don't do anything together, right? And so that square with Mars in Cancer, Cancer is very much concerned with home and family and tribe, with those who we have emotional bonds, those who are closest to us. And so there may be some tension and frustration going on here with that square, especially when it comes to some very real issues of how do I feed my family? How do I keep a roof over not just my head, but my loved ones' heads? How do I tend to my community? How do I help people who are important to me who may be vulnerable? Okay, all of those things come up with that square. And then Chiron is quincunx Vesta. Quincunx is 5/12 of a circle. It is an aspect where the planets involved do not share an element and do not share a modality. And therefore, they have difficulty understanding each other. And yet, they are in relationship with each other. And so it's kind of like being on a teeter-totter, trying to figure out how do we come to some level of balance together. And so in this case, we've got Chiron, who's been trying to teach us these lessons about, our executive function, our ability to do things for ourselves versus interacting with other people. But also, Chiron in Aries tests our bravery, can dredge up the issues with toxic masculinity in particular, but also, calls into question our ambition, our aggression, our drive. Okay, and quincunx Vesta is in Scorpio, also ruled by Mars. So Mars is doing lots of heavy lifting here, despite not really being up to speed yet. And Vesta relates to where is our focus? What are we paying attention to? What do we hold sacred? What is the spark that lights us up? And that defines our home territory. Vesta is the goddess of the hearth, but also Vesta is the Roman goddess of the hearth, and is therefore the light not only of the home, but the light of the empire, with all the attendant issues with that, with imperialism and colonialism, dredges up all of that. And so I'm inclined to think that this quincunx reminds us that that the personal is political, that the issues that we have as individuals relate back to the issues we have as a society, that the issues that we have as a society impact us not simply in terms of, was my life good or not, but rather that if there are issues within the society, I can't help but be touched by those, even if my life looks good on the surface.
Exactly. Thank you for all that. And I want to just reiterate that Thor's hammer, where it says Vesta, is Juno, the planet to the right of where the line is drawn, just so that if you are watching that you get that. So thank you. And now we're going to go on to some more aspects. We have Saturn, Mercury, North Node, and Neptune conjunct in Pisces. So that, we've been talking about this Pisces pile up, and you can watch the episode we did a few days ago on that to get more information. And also in the sign of Pisces, we have Ceres and the sun and the moon too. So we have quite a few points in Pisces. And then we have 2 mini grand trines and an opposition. So would you like to talk about one of those mini grand trines, Simon?
Well, so we're looking at, there's this ongoing minor grand trine that we see with Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune and the North Node in Pisces, and Uranus in Taurus. I have been harping on this for a while now, but this all three of these outer planets have been in this minor grand trine since autumn of 2024. And they are each going through this process of leaving a yin sign, either a water or an earth sign, and going into yang signs, either air or fire. And Pluto was the first to head into their new yang home. And Neptune will be next. Is going to head into Aries at the end of April, I believe. April? No,
Yes,
sorry, end of March.
Oh, yes, that's right.
End of March. And then Uranus will head into Gemini in, I think, early July.
Yes.
And so all three of these outer planets are acting together because they're all in this configuration together. And when we're looking at the outer planets, they govern generational themes, they govern big world events, and kind of the temperament of the decade or two that they are in a sign. And so right now, all of them are acting together. These big, powerful, world-changing forces. And they're in harmony with each other, even if, while we're experiencing that, we may not necessarily feel like it's harmonious. But, the vision that Neptune brings to the table, the change that Uranus inspires, the awareness of what needs to be transformed that Pluto is bringing our attention to. All of these are acting together at this time. And so if it feels like we're living in momentous times, well, indeed we are. That other minor grand trine, that would be the Neptune Uranus with Mars. And again, we've talked quite a bit about Mars wanting to get back up to speed. How we act as a result of the desire for liberation and the vision, the inspiration of Neptune, but also the potential for confusion. All right. There's a lot of pressure that we saw being brought on Mars as a result of the Taurus hammer, and yet within the context of the grand trine that Mars is applying to Mars, it's still fairly loose at the moment, but it's going to get tighter as Mars moves forward over the next few weeks. That sense of vision and inspiration can guide our actions as we move forward. And because it's a supportive configuration, that can help to perhaps give us a sense of faith, of cosmic guidance, even when we're not necessarily consciously sure what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, thank you for all that information. That's great. So, what advice would you leave people for the new moon for Pisces for this phase, or suggestions besides what we might have already talked about, or just reintegrate of something that you already said that you want to drive home, so to speak?
Well, Pisces can really feel like having the weight of the world on your shoulders a bit. Partly because Pisces is sensitive and intuitive and empathetic, then seeing the suffering of the world, feeling the suffering of the world added to your own concerns can be a bit much sometimes. And can have us feeling, a little down in the dumps and teary and, and all of that. At the same time, it's important for us to remember that it's okay to feel grief for what is suffering, and to really let ourselves feel it and process it is part of what we're actually supposed to be doing. A lot of times we try to shy away from negative feelings. Okay? Negative feelings. And we got to put on a brave face and get things done, and I don't have time for that stuff. Okay? But allowing ourselves to cry, among other things, actually releases hormones, releases stuff, buildup of stuff in our bodies. I believe tears are predominantly prolactin. So if you got an excess of prolactin in the system, crying is going to release that, right? And there's this kind of emotional cleansing process that I think is being emphasized right now when we're looking at so many things in Pisces. All of the forces that these planets relate to, all of the topics that these planets relate to, could benefit from sitting in our feelings for a while and letting ourselves maybe have a good cry or a nice long bath to release some of that. Water carries memory. We can speak to the water and tell it to take away the stuff that we want to wash out of our system, so that when the vernal equinox comes, when Aries season begins, when the zodiac starts over again and we start a new cycle, we are prepared to meet that new season fresh and clean, liberated of some of the stuff that we've been maybe carrying around for too long. I think this is a good time of moving ourselves forward with that North Node in Pisces into the willingness to sit with challenging feelings, to sit with perhaps contradictory feelings. The Pisces symbol of the two fish, they're going in two different directions. Right? And so paradox and contradiction are things that Pisces has to get good with. Life is not always straightforward.
Exactly. And my advice is be compassionate with yourself as you are with others, and to feel the feelings, but as much as possible, not get overwhelmed by the feelings. So that's what I'm going to say.
Yes, actually, that makes a lot of sense in terms of the letting go that I was talking about. That if we're going to feel those feelings and not be overwhelmed by them, part of that is that we have to let them flow through us, right? Not try to stop them.
Yes, don't try to stop them. Let them flow. So Madam Simon has a Patreon page, and I'm going to let her tell you about it.
So I both write and do art related to astrology and tarot. I'm also a tarot reader, and other metaphysical topics. And so I typically write about these astrological transits that Liz and I talk about on this show. I write about those at least once a week. And then I also do custom astrological art for my patrons. as well as random art informed by the stars and other metaphysical topics. So if you're interested in that, definitely visit me on Patreon. And then I'm also a consulting astrologer, as Liz is. And so if you wish to schedule a consultation, you can find me at iconalchemy.com.
Thank you. And like Simon said, I do consultations. I have a newsletter, and you're watching my YouTube channel. So subscribe and enjoy. And I want to thank everybody that's watching live and all those that come back and watch later. I want to say thank you for supporting my channel. I appreciate you. And then other podcasts that are coming up is there's still a couple more to do for the astrological highlights of 2025, but you can watch the past ones in my library there. And we have magical astrology coming up with Robert Passetti, and Justin and I do the astrological forecast each month, a full moon forecast and a Chiron asteroid series. And the Astrology Star Sisters, we do Chinese astrology, decans using astrology and tarot, dwarf planets, fixed stars, planet stationing, Uranian astrology, and the Venus star point. And I will be on Talk Cosmos on March 30th for the Aries solar eclipse, the new moon, and it's about Empower Now. And again, to get a hold of Simon, it's iconalchemy.com, and my website is alightpath.com. And I want to thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. So goodbye for now. See you soon.